Unreal Blueprints, introducing widgets. So let's review what we know so far. We know a level is a collection of actors. We know we can create subclasses of these actors by creating the blueprints based on the name of the visual scripting language, blueprints. And when we use blueprints, we know they're composed of graphs, which are collections of nodes, and nodes, which are defined functionality. We also know when using a blueprint, we open it up in the blueprint editor within the Unreal, when we can add variables, functions, we can react to events as part of the special event graph, and we can also create event dispatchers. We also know that we can directly create blueprints in the content browser. So previously we have been moving actors from the place actor panel into the viewport, and then over in the world outliner selecting that actor and creating blueprints from there. But we also know we can create blueprints directly from the content browser. We've already seen a few examples of that within this series. So let's kind of follow that concept into this new use of widgets. So what is a widget? Well, it's a collection of user interface elements. It is a blueprint, but it's a special kind of blueprint. So similar to how levels have level blueprints, widgets are another special kind of blueprint. But in this case, it has both a designer and a blueprint view, and we'll see an example of that when I move into Unreal. Each widget allows for arranging user interface elements and reacting to how those elements are used for a user. So for example, we could have some buttons in a designer view and then set up their events within the blueprint view. And we'll see an example of that. When we create a new widget, we create a widget blueprint. So again, this is a subclass, and we can do it directly within the content browser using either the contextual right-click menu or the add import menu as well. So when we use a widget, this is where things get a little bit different. So because this starts immediately as a subclass, we have to create it, and then we have to add it to a viewport. So because they exist as a special kind of blueprint, they need to be added to a level. So it's a two-step process. And in fact, we'll kind of add some future steps in future videos. But for right now, it's a two-step process. We need to create the widget based on the subclass. And then we need to add it to the viewport, which will basically put it in front of the user. So we need to create it, and then we need to add it for the user to see. And then we'll see in future videos ways to create it and then take it away again. But at this point, we just want to introduce the concept of a widget, a collection of user interface elements, and then how we can initially use it within Unreal. So speaking of that, let's move over to Unreal to see this in action. So over here in Unreal, I have a scene set up with no starter content and nothing else going on. So I'm going to start by creating a widget. I'm going to open the widget in its own editor. I'm going to add some buttons. Then I'm going to set up one of those buttons to quit the game. And then I'm going to show you how to, in a different blueprint, create an instance of that subclass and then add it to the viewport so we can actually use it. So multiple steps going on here. Let's start though by creating a blueprint. So I can either use add import down here in the content browser, or I could right click and do the same thing. And I'll just add this, I'll go about this first method. Add import user interface widget blueprint. Boom. I'm going to call this main menu. Okay. So this is a blueprint, so it's a subclass, but it's a special type of blueprint. So if I double click on this, it will open it up in the blueprint editor, but it look a little bit different. We're looking at the designer view. We see it up here in the top right hand corner. And it also has graphs, which we're used to seeing. So let's design some stuff very simply here. I will drag some buttons over here from the palette on here. Notice, by the way, buttons do not have text by default. I will add a second button, make this a little bit bigger. And if I was making a professional main menu, I might spend some time organizing this and making this look very nicely, but I'm just putting these as an example. So notice these don't have text, so one of the useful things about buttons is the text is down here at the bottom. Drop text into these right here. So I'm going to rename this text to quit. And I'm now going to click on the button and rename the button quit button. So the reason I've renamed it quit button is so I have easy access to it in the event graph, which I'm going to move to next. So I'm going to go ahead and compile this because it is a blueprint, and we'll go ahead and save it. And we'll move from designer to graph. So I added 2 different buttons, and hey, look, they're already added as variables for me. So Unreal's taking care of that work for me. So if I click on quit button, notice it already has events pre-programmed, or at least what assumes events you might use, which is to say on click, on pressed, on released, on hovered, on unhovered. So we could do some advanced UI stuff if we wanted to, but let's just right now use on click, press. And there we go. It automatically added the event for me. On clicked, quit button right here, on clicked. What do we want? I want this to quit. So find quit game, and there we go. So this is going to automatically quit, and I've got on click directly connected to this. Let's compile and save. So moving back over to designer, we see we've got 2 things right here, and I got a graph right here that when I click on this button will quit the game. So pretty simple so far. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this and come back into the Unreal editor. So I've got my blueprint, which is a subclass, which is a blueprint, and I want to use it somehow. So this is where things get a little bit interesting because, as I mentioned, it's a 2-step process. So we need to create this widget, and then we need to add it to the viewport. So as a reminder, when we're currently looking at right here, right in the middle of my screen is the viewport, literally the view into what we're looking at. So if we add something to the viewport, it would put it right in front of the user, which is what we want. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and open up the level blueprint. So blueprints, open level blueprint. And when event begin play happens, I'm going to drag off this execution pin. What I want to do is create the widget and then add it to the viewport. So search for create, make sure you spell create correctly. Widget, there it is right there. Okay, so this is construct none. So we have to select the class, the subclass that we want. So right here, this drop down, come down here to main menu, and then notice it changed, create main menu widget. So when the event starts, we're going to create the widget. So again, 2-step process. This is process part 1. Process part 2 is we need to add it to the viewport. So let's go ahead and add to, there it is, viewport. And now not only do I need the execution pin connected between this node and the next, I need its output as well. Its output here becomes the input over here. So when the event starts, when the level starts, create a widget right here, add it to the viewport right here. Let's go ahead and click on compile and save. And I'll just call this untitled because I've not currently given this level a name yet. And now it's saved. Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to minimize this right here. So what's going to happen is we're going to start play. Event begin play is going to happen. We're going to then create a widget, and the widget's going to be added to the viewport. There it is. And we see text block and quit. And if I click on quit, it stops playing. So this has been an introduction to widgets. Notice we haven't done a whole lot with them so far, and we're going to spend more time in future videos digging into them. But this just introduces the concept. So a widget is a collection of user interface elements. We can create a new widget by using either add import down here, user interface widget blueprint, or the right-click contextual menu, user interface widget blueprint. Once we have that, double-clicking on it brings up the blueprint editor, but widgets are different. They have a designer view and a graph view right here, or designer and graph modes. So using the designer mode, we can drag things out of the palette, various user interface elements, borders and buttons and checkboxes and images and all kinds of things. Then once we have them, we can move over to the graph and respond to various user events. Every time we add a new element that has some type of interactability to it, we can then use it as a variable. So for quit button, I can come down here to its details and select the event I want, and I want it on click, and we have on clicked quit button directly into quit game. So we saw then over here in the level blueprint, when the event begin play happened, I created the main menu widget, added to the viewport. And this allows us to immediately start using it. Now, in future videos, again, we will get more complicated with creating menus and taking menus away and things like that, as well as using the values from menus, which will become important in the future. But for right now, we're introduced to widgets, and they are just collections of user interface elements that we can use in Unreal.